Welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Kiriakou, and this is the show for recruiters, founders, and high performers who want to get 1% better every single day. Every single week, we dive into things like business development, mindset, and performance with the best people in this industry. We also have people outside of the industry that can help you upskill on things that trickle down into your recruitment. So if you want to get better clients, better conversations, real results, this is the best place for you. Before I let you go, make sure that you hit like or subscribe, make sure that you're following the show. And if you are returning, I just wanted to say a huge thank you from me. The engagement as of late has been fantastic. So that's enough from me. Let's get into this week's episode, and I hope you enjoy. Hello everybody, welcome back to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Kiriakou. Today I'm joined by Adam Wagster. I'm going to go to Adam to do a bit of an intro, but just quickly before we get into this episode, just wanted to say a huge thank you for people that have been tuning in recently, for new subscribers and followers, and for people that are returning. Thank you so much. Can't do this without you guys. So without further ado, Adam, thank you very much for taking the time to do this with me today. We've obviously had a few conversations, and before we click record, I said, the conversations that we had, I think the first chat we had on the phone was almost podcast worthy. So I'm pretty buzzing to get into this. So yeah, if you don't mind then, Adam, give us a bit of an intro. Tell us a little bit about you, who you are, etc.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thanks, Charles. Really good to be here. And yeah, as you say, enjoyed a couple of our conversations. Hopefully we'll get the flow going well today that we had over the phone. So we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, I'm Adam Wagster. I'm the CEO of Uniting Ambition. We are a UK-based sort of generalist technology staffing recruitment business, both contract and perm. We have been in existence. This is our 20th year anniversary come the end of the year. So 20 years we've been trading. Interesting story. I joined in 2013 as business development director. The guy who used to own the business was an ex-boss of mine. Joined to work with him and sort of grow out the business. Interesting last 13 years. We've developed service lines. We had HR, finance, professional services, IT, technology has always been at our core. So we've sort of deviated, come back to where we sort of first began. I got control of the business with some PE, private equity backing in end of 2018. So coming into our sort of 8th year of trading, still with the same PE backers, business called Tempting Ventures. They're huge in the US. They've got a big portfolio of businesses over in the US. I think we've got 7 brands over there. I'm involved with one of them over there, a business called Goliath, which again, software engineering technology business, primarily into the hedge funds, mega fees. Like we had a 312k fee starting in April. We also had a 350k fee not starting January last year. So it's one of those, the good, the bad, the ugly. But yeah, Uniting Ambition, primarily UK centric, technology, but underpinned specifically by software engineering and data, and where those worlds are colliding at the moment, which is very much automation, AI, machine learning. So that's very much our bag. I'd like to think, and I think, I suppose the testimonial stack up for that is we do a very good job. We're not your archetypal sort of sales focused boiler room recruitment business. Head office is in Stoke-on-Trent, so it's not the epicenter. It's not exactly EC2 from a cultural perspective, but really good people out there, really good longevity with the clients we work with. Work with a lot of big enterprise clients over the years who are still with us. So we're obviously doing something well. Average tenure out there is probably 7 years. So we've got a load of experienced people, a load of really good recruiters who are passionate about what we do, who take the job seriously, offer a great service, and we still have a bit of fun. It's been a tough sort of few years. I think if you think I got control at 2018, end of 2018, we had one good year of running. Then we had the madness of COVID. Then we had the boom of 21, 22. And then we've had the pain, I suppose, of 23, 24, 25. Everybody here's stuck through it, through thick and thin, which is great to see. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that over the next couple of years, we can get more of a normalized curve. We can get back to doing what we're doing, enjoying the job a bit more, supporting clients and making some money.
Yeah, awesome, man. Awesome. Well, look, I think one of the things that I was really excited to get into, we spoke a little bit about this before we click record, was the fact that you are quite UK centric, right? And I said just before we click record that there are so many businesses now that crap on the UK market. And to an extent, I understand it. Like, it's a very saturated market. The perception of recruiters and recruitment businesses isn't the greatest. When I got into this industry, I've said this so many times that, my mum was embarrassed to tell her friends that her son was a recruiter, right? And even to this day, you tell like my wife's friends, oh, what do you do? I work in the recruitment industry. Oh, you're a recruiter. It's like,
Yeah.
what? In the US, obviously fees are so much bigger. Europe, fees are still fantastic. But the UK market, there's still so much business to do in the UK market. So I think one of the first things that I wanted to tackle with you in this episode was that, you guys have obviously got a very consistent brand. You've been doing well. I appreciate there are peaks and troughs, and the last few years have been tough. But for companies or people setting out in the UK, like, what are some steps that you've taken, or some lessons that you've learned to be that consistent brand in the UK market and thrive, essentially, thrive within the UK market? Hey guys, quick one before we jump back into the episode. If you are a recruiter who feels like half your week disappears into admin, follow-ups, data cleaning, and jumping between several different tools, then listen up, because this episode is officially sponsored by SourceWhale. SourceWhale is the recruitment productivity platform, and I don't just mean another tool that you'll forget to use. I mean the tool that actually gives you your time back. You can run your entire desk in one place. Outreach, sourcing, data enrichment, multi-step email and LinkedIn sequences, inbox management, and even call notes. It's all there, synced, automated, and according to their stats, recruiters using SourceWhale see 56% higher response rates, double the pipeline, and approximately save around 8 hours of admin every single week. If you're like me, admin as a recruiter is the devil, and this productivity platform really helps you save a load of time. So reach out to SourceWhale, go to sourcewhale.com. It's a fantastic platform. I've used it myself. I really believe in it, and I'm super grateful for them sponsoring the podcast. Let's get back into the episode.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think there's probably a number of different sort of angles to it. If you go back 10 years or so, I've been in this game for 25 years. It's all I've ever done. It's all I've ever known. I've worked out of the 25 years I've done this. I worked in the Middle East for 4 years, so I've got a real understanding of how that market works. I've got businesses that trade in the UK. We had a business that was specifically focused in Germany for 4 or 5 years. So I've got a pretty good view of how the world works from a staffing, from a recruitment perspective. I think you go back 10 years, 100% of the business, or 95% of the businesses we knew, or we interacted with, or we were aware of, were primarily one location centric. If you take away the huge big boys, the Randstads and the sort of the big global operators, and that's the way it was. And there were 20 odd thousand recruitment businesses in the UK focusing within the niches primarily in the UK. I think then you get people like S3 who started expanding into Benelux and into Europe, and that all expanded. But I suppose, from my perspective, the UK has always been the core of our business. It always has, and it always will be. I think the UK is an interesting market, isn't it? Like, ultimately, the macroeconomics of the UK, we get pulled from pillar to post. If America's having a shit, we get a bit of a cold. If Europe's falling over a bit, we get the sort of the consequences from it. So it's always been a bit of a, I suppose, a market that gets influenced by where the world is. But without getting too much into the boring macros of it, I suppose, to answer your question a bit more, I think the UK is still one of the top 7 economies in the world. There's still a huge amount of business in here. There's still a huge amount of investment in here. And what I've seen over the last 3 years is every man and dog doing one of two things. Like, 40% of recruiters have left the industry. So that leaves a gaping hole, and that's in the UK. A huge amount of our competitor businesses, or businesses that we've traded against in the past, have got really carried away and looked Europe side or stateside, and they're stood there going, the grass is greener. From I suppose, a business perspective, I see that as a huge opportunity, because it's got to leave a huge gulf in the supply chain within the UK. Like, from a delivery capability, from an attention capability, from a care capability, most of the recruitment businesses that I'm aware of are like, sod that, I don't want to deal with the UK. I'm going to go and, as I say, chase the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or leave the industry completely. So I think why we've been successful and why we've managed to sort of stand the test of time over the last 20 years is we focus very heavily on giving a good experience for our candidates and clients. We focus very heavily on knowing what our swim lane is. Like, the vast majority of our money over the years, the vast majority of our client base over the years, have been within that retail, e-com, sort of B2C type environment. Most of our our cornerstone clients are in that world, whether it's retail, gaming and gambling, e-com. And I think when you focus on an ecosystem and you become experts in an ecosystem, and you also have a reputation with that in that ecosystem, then really that should test the sort of the pains of ups and downs and sort of market conditions. So we've worked really hard to build good relationships, long-term relationships with candidates and clients. I think the business has been going too long that we are in danger, and we have seen it a few times. I'm not being sort of flippant here, but some of our long-standing clients are now dying. So we're going to have to, I know it's a horrible thing to say, but we've been doing it so long, we've been servicing these people so long that they're starting to drop off, retiring and drop off the end of the end of the conveyor belt. So I think that's primarily where a lot of our success is coming from, just doing a good job, focusing and doubling down on the market you know best, building good relationships with candidates and clients, taking the job seriously. Service is at the top of our list in everything we do. Like, I think you go on our website, look at some of the testimonials. It's all about doing the job correctly. We're not fly by night. We're consultative in our approach, and we want to make sure we're delivering results. And I think in any market in the world, if you do that, you should do pretty well. But I think the UK values that probably more than anybody else. And you're right, recruiters are sometimes looked down people's noses at and sort of a second class sort of employment position, but it's not. We offer phenomenal services. The amount of differences we've made to the candidates we've worked with over the years, and especially the projects we've delivered to some of the clients, are phenomenal. Like, we're really proud to stand over those and stand by those time and time again. And like, the guys out here have got a morning of sort of hammering the phones, a bit of sales activity. We try and do it once a week where everybody's sort of involved in a couple of sprints. And one of the things I say before we kick it off every single time is you've got to be proud about what we've done. You look at the testimonials and the case studies we've got, and that's because we believe in the UK, we believe in what we do, and you want to do a good job. And I think that, I suppose, for a concise answer, if you want that, just be passionate about what you do, believe in what you do and offer a good service, and you shouldn't go too far wrong with that.
I couldn't agree more. There was a lady that came on my podcast start of the year called Sarah Leet, and her whole methodology when she set her recruitment business up was all about customer service. And she talked about her unique story about some of the roles that she did when she went traveling and things like that. And she talked about that customer service element. And something that I really took away from that episode, and it's similar to what you've just said there, is a lot of recruitment businesses, unfortunately, have this mindset of fee chasing. Right. And I get it, right? Because running a recruitment business, ultimately, you depend on doing deals, right? That's how the recruitment business, that's how the lights keep on. But how do you differentiate yourself if you become a specialist, like we spoke about before we click recording, right? If you want to continue that success for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, etc., you can't just be calling clients and saying, I see you hiring, I've got a candidate, I've got a job for you, Like, that's so transactional. And look, I'm not going to crap on people that are just purely transactional, right? Because there are some very good businesses out there that do that. But the businesses that I'm seeing that are absolutely flying right now are those and again, ones that have been going on for 30, 40 years, are those ones that are so passionate about the service they offer. And I think that's what people forget about recruitment, right? Yes, you are finding a candidate for a job and vice versa, but the service you give that person, you mentioned there, and it's a crazy one about how like a lot of these people are retiring or, they end up dying, right? But you've worked with those businesses for so long. Why? Because you've got really good relationships and you've offered a fantastic service, right? I saw something on LinkedIn the other day. I can't remember who posted it, but they were talking about relationships is like an overused phrase and blah, blah, blah. And it's about results. But you get those results, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here. You get those results off the back of building a good relationship with someone. If you've got dozens and dozens or hundreds of great testimonials and a proven track record of success, and maybe this is old fashioned of me, right? But I still believe that people will buy from people that they like. If you've got someone that's got 100 plus testimonials on their website and there's another person with 100 plus testimonials on their website, but that first conversation you have with that recruiter, you go, oh, do they actually really care about our business objectives? Do they really want to actually solve our problems? Do I actually like this person? Because it's an intimate process working with a recruiter, right? Can I see myself speaking to this person every single day? The likelihood is 9 times out of 10, that client, that candidate, that client is going to want to work with that recruiter that they believe has their best interest at heart. You know what I think?
Yeah, no, agree. I think, listen, at the end of the day, we're in a relationship game, aren't we? That's what it's all about. People buy off people. And we're not selling a tangible product that you walk into, you're like, I want to buy a new iPhone. I'm going to walk into a shop and buy an iPhone. We're selling a service ultimately, aren't we? And that service has got to satisfy a number of needs. Primarily, what are we here to do? We're here to solve the problem. Now, some clients know what that problem is definitively and have it in the box and can push that out, and that can be more of a transactional square peg, square hole. A lot of the businesses we deal with and have done over the years, and a lot of any type of business challenges are a lot grayer, aren't they? You've got to really get under the skin of understanding the objectives of the business, where they're trying to get to, the as is to be. But more importantly, it's that cultural piece.
Yeah.
Like, just because an individual has CV matching does not mean that individual is going to succeed in their environment. And I think we came, United Ambition came from an internal function. We were the internal recruitment arm, cornerstone it was called, of the Cordwell Group. But back in the day, we're going back 20 odd years now. And the whole ethos of what we were about was not recruiting for skills, but was recruiting for culture. You find the individual who shares your passion for the business, who shares the business's ambitions, who shares the business's drive, determination, whatever those nuances of your organization are. Your primary starting point is, can that person, like, I'm not going to talk about I don't know, mechanical engineer for a software engineer. You've got to have obviously an intelligent sort of thought process around the swim lane you're working within. But the starting point is that cultural fit, is that relationship piece.
Yeah.
That we're trying to find people who are going to make your business better, who to help your business achieve the goals. And primarily to do that, you've got to have a person that fits in your environment, who shares your values and works within your culture. And I think that's really important. And being able to articulate that lands well with clients, because the list that you've listened to what I've told you, you've understood the type of environment we're in, you've understood the type of person we need. It's not just a tick boxing exercise on a job spec. And once you start putting people in front of them, and once you start managing an interview process and the chemistry works, now you never get it right first time, but everything's a learning process. But if you can consistently put people in front of your clients who, yes, can do the job, obviously, but more importantly, they can be seen to help them move the business forward, then you become a trusted partner. You become the go-to individual to help their business achieve the goals. And that's always been massively important to the way I've operated and the way I've wanted to work. I don't want to be a transaction recruiter. And probably to my downfall and my business's success, sometimes I've been too far the other way, because I've seen plenty of businesses out there who are far larger, far successful than we are, who have made a shitload of more money by being that transactional, go in there, make a fee, get out, try and do it somewhere else. And I think that model's phenomenal. And I suppose the older I get, the more I go, if I'd done that, I might be a hell of a lot better off, or I might be able to retire early, or whatever it may be. But I think you've got to stay true to who you are and what you believe in. And I do think, in my opinion, recruitment is a partnership model. It's a relationship-driven gig where you've got to build strong relationships with people. People have got to trust you.
Yeah.
I think that's it. You're not selling iPhones. I don't care who you buy your iPhone from. I'll buy it from a website. I'll buy it from some bloke in a shop. You're selling the future and careers of individuals, candidates you're working with, but you're also supporting the future dreams of the businesses you're helping and the people who are the key stakeholders in that. So it's a big responsibility, and the good ones, the ones who survive, the ones who have repeat business, the ones who have clients that you work with over and over the years, hopefully like we're viewed as. That's the way you work. It is. It's about supporting organisations in a partnership model to get them to where they want to get to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So, something that's popped up in a lot of conversations, and I wanted to pick your brains about this. I've had a lot of people reach out to me, just in regards to like just spot coaching, like, this is my BD strategy, rip it to parts. Like, this is how I'm approaching my market. This is how I'm approaching conversations. And the reoccurring theme that keeps popping up, Adam, is that people haven't really drilled down into their ICP. And if you go on their website and on their LinkedIn, I'm a specialist in AI, I'm a specialist in tech sales, whatever it is. When you actually drill into it, like I've spoken to some people this week that, oh yeah, I do, engineering in North America. I also do South America marketing. I also do sales in the UK. And you're like, wait, what? How are you a specialist if you're doing all those geographic regions, all these types of roles? And something I learned years and years and years ago was that we got taught, pick 3 job titles that you want to recruit for, and 3 of the job titles of hiring managers. And if you can build lists of, because I did medtech sales, right? If you build lists of like national sales managers, regional sales managers, sales directors, and who falls under that, you got sales reps, field clinical application specialists, etc., right? And then we were location based. So I just predominantly initially just did the UK, and you'd have like territories split up across the UK. And after doing that for like 6 months, I knew a lot about what those candidates were doing and what the challenges were of those hiring managers. So I almost became a bit of an advisor, like a talent advisor, even though I was like 23, 24 years old. Bit of imposter syndrome when you're speaking to someone that's 40 that's been doing the job 25 years. But like I was sat there going, I know exactly the process that we need to follow to help you achieve your goal or help you achieve your career goals, whatever it is. But from your perspective, right, and you've been doing this a while, if you have someone new starting your business, or if someone's listening to this and going, do you know what? Yeah, my ICP, I don't even really know what my ICP is. What's been your process of mapping out your ideal customer profile and like on getting on that road to being that quote specialist in that market?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you talk about a market. A market could be it's huge. Like God, my first job in recruitment was working for Reed Accountancy, doing temps in postcodes in Manchester, and it
Mm,
was temp credit controllers, temp purchase ledger clerks, temp whatever. So I started off pretty uber niche, small patch, three, as you say, 3 or 4 job titles, and that was it. I then expanded over the years, and I think when I joined UA, we were trying to be all things to all men.
right.
So we had a huge amount, we had 90 odd people in the business. We did contact center, we did IT, we did HR, finance, sales, marketing. And that was the strategy of the owner at the time, was to try and grow a business that you could basically take any customer on board, and you could sort of support them across that whole spectrum of functional areas. The strategy behind that was we were focusing on as you talk about your ICP, we were focusing on private invested or private equity backed growth startup businesses. So customers between 100 headcount and 10,000, people who are on the top track 100 or top track 200, fast track 150. So there was quite a defined customer profile around that, which we then tried to integrate, or I suppose get into those customers, break into those customers and sell them a whole suite of products. And that in whatever, 12, 13 years ago wasn't necessarily the common sort of strategy, but it was one that a number of businesses did. You don't look at Hayes or a Michael Page or any of those bigger businesses. It was sort of replicating that model.
If you've made it this far into the episode, do everybody a favor and just like or favorite this particular episode. Make sure you're following, make sure you're subscribing, whatever platform it is. And if you're not going to do it for me or because of the love of the show, do it for Marshall, the star of the show. Do it for Marshall, because if you don't like this, if you don't follow it, if you don't upvote it or subscribe, Marshall's going to be really upset, and no one wants to see Marshall upset. So do everyone a favour and like, follow, subscribe, whatever platform it is, and Marshall will be happy. Anyway, let's get back into this episode, shall we?
Fast forward sort of 5 or 6 years, and I got a VC involved, and I remember having a conversation with the VC at our old office. He had a back pain at the time. He was laying on the floor. Ryan, you'll remember this if you watch him. And his attitude was, we're too wide. We're too wide. We need to be inch wide, mile deep, sort of thing. And we're the complete opposite. We're a mile wide and an inch deep, and we're not being famous for anything. We're not being known for anything. And his attitude was, right, stop doing everything. We're just going to do Scala. And he randomly picked that out. And I had a heart attack at the time. I'm like, the business, I'm trying to hit numbers. You've got your head's in the business, not working on the business. And he was obviously looking from a helicopter view, going, you're just too wide. And it took us probably 2 years to sort of narrow the business down, for even from a tech perspective, from we're doing all this to where we sit today, which, albeit is still a lot wider than most businesses, software engineering, data, it's a wide thing, but we are sensibly segmented in that, and we do, I suppose, support the customers that we work with. I suppose to answer your question as your ICP, I think, yes, if I was starting up tomorrow, I would pick a really narrow swim lane. Like, I've got people out there who are experts in project managers, software developers, data engineers. So I've tried to squeeze them all as narrow as I can get. But if I was starting a business tomorrow, I would pick something uber narrow, whether it's go-to-market specialist for SaaS organizations in North America, or whether it's agentic AI engineers, and you've got to really narrow down what that looks like for I don't know, startup businesses in the UK that have gone through seed and Series A fundings, less than 100 headcount, something like that. There's so many tools you can use, whether it's any of the Chat GPTs, Claude, Apollo we've got, where you can actually just map out what that market looks like with the customer list, a reason behind why that a customer is on that target list, the types of people are looking for, the funding background, and just use your intelligence there, obviously supported by Claude or whatever, to give you a full plan. So I think it's a difficult if it's a difficult one for me to answer in terms of we as an organization, me individually, have moved through that sort of
Mm.
decision making process so many times over the last 25 years. But I think what I've learned over that period of time as an advisory piece to anybody watching is go and find something narrow, make sure it's supported by a target list of customers with an accessible barrier to entry.
Hmm.
Because I think the difficulty you've got sometimes is you can have a target list of 20 or 30 clients, your chance of breaking into them is zero. So you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
Like the days of spec selling in the UK are pretty much over, I see. I just don't see well, we're not getting the traction we used to be. Maybe that's because we're too wide and we're in a market that is a bit wider. But if you've got to work out what your operating model is, you've got to work
Mm.
out what your sales, your go-to-market strategy is, and then you've got to have a list of clients that you believe through whatever research you've done are going to be able to provide you with cash. And then
Yeah.
you've got to go out there and find the best bloody candidates you possibly can, and use your way to break into them.
Mm.
And I think that's how I would start it as today. And we talked about it earlier. You look at the UK landscape at the moment, there must be, I don't know, an extra 5,000, 6,000. I don't know the number. I imagine it's around that area of owner managed startup guys, experienced recruiters who have had 2 or 3 years of shit working with businesses going, I don't know why I'm doing this for 3 or 4 grand a month or 5 grand a month or whatever the next. They're not earning huge amounts of comms. I'm going to go and set up my own. And I know for a fact in the Manchester area, there's at least a couple of hundred who've done that. So you extract that over the rest of the UK.
Hmm.
And that's I think that's a great thing to do because what you've got there are individuals who are experienced recruiters who probably know their swim lane really well because that's all they've done for somebody else for 3, 4, 5, 7, whatever years. And now they're going to try it themselves, and they are your true experts.
Mm.
The challenge you get with that is then getting scale because that's the
Yeah.
difficulty. Again, you look at the stats, isn't it? Out of the 20 odd thousand UK recruitment businesses, 19 and a half odd thousand or 98, 99% of them are sub 5 people. I think something along those lines, or sub 10 people. So the challenge you always get in that world, and it depends what you want from a career perspective, from a lifestyle perspective, is how scalable is that?
Mm.
But that's a different question, a different story,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
suppose.
yeah. Well, I think what's quite interesting is that you don't want to be too wide, you don't want to be too niche, right? And
Yeah,
something that you said, and I want to tackle this in a second. When you become too niche, and I had this, I guess it is an issue. I had this issue when I did surgical sales reps in the UK, and I remember looking at my target client list, and we had KPIs that were, add, 2 new contacts per day, add a new client per day, whatever it was. And by like the end of like the third month, I remember like looking and going, I think I've added everyone to the system. Like there's
yeah,
unless I add the Benelux and DAC sales managers, like I think I've kind of capped out. And I remember sitting down with my manager and he was like, "Oh, your KPI is quite low for like adding new businesses and stuff." And I was like, "Well, I don't
got everybody.
really. Yeah, like, I think I've added everyone to the system. Like unless I'm missing a trick here." And the leads I was getting, because I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of once you have actually mapped out the ICP in the UK, how do you actually attack that? But I remember like the leads I was getting, and this goes to your point a second ago about what's the point in having some companies in your target client list where you just know you're not going to get in. And like in my industry, like the big players were like Johnson and Johnson, Medtronic, like we're talking 20,000 plus
Yeah.
employees, right?
How are you going to get
PS
through the door in those? Yeah.
PSL was just
Yeah.
everywhere, like 15 people in a talent acquisition team. Just like, I mean, I got on a PSL for a company called Olympus. They make cameras and surgical endoscopes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a great achievement for me. It's like, no one's ever gotten that PSL. It's a bloody nightmare. It was honestly, I made more money headhunting people at that business than I did working with that company.
Black hole, ATSs, no
Just,
feedback.
yeah, no feedback. You submit a CV, they have an interview. 3 weeks later, we'd like to book them in for a second stage. The candidate's gone. Like
Yeah.
the level of service from them was horrendous. But I always say to people that yes, you want to be very niche, but you've also got to use your bloody brain. And also these days, the power of I can have a conversation with Claude or ChatGPT to really fully map out my market and figure out, is there enough businesses for me to approach? And if there isn't, and I'm doing sales reps for medical like surgical and there's a certain amount of companies, okay, fine, I'll just do the same job titles but in Europe, but with the same types of businesses. And all of a sudden, I've tripled my
Triple
market
market,
and
yeah.
the ability to
And
do that.
that's the beauty of where we stand today as Group. We were talking about first question, wasn't it? Why we double down on the UK market. The reality of it is, if you're going to be like, yes, we're in a swim lane, software engineering, data, etc., but we're very client centric. We work with our, as I said before, we work with our clients for a long time. We want to make sure we look after them. We obviously want to keep growing and customer acquisition, and a lot of that is done by comparing our current customer base with who else is out there that we can match them together with. But if you're starting up now and you're going to go uber niche, then you go inch wide, but you go geographically a lot bigger. And then you look at Europe. I started a business doing SAP into Europe, United Enterprise, just before the pandemic. So the first year was bloody tough. We then had a great 2 years where I know everybody boomed, but the business did phenomenally well. And then it was specifically in Germany. The German economy just went boof, 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 boof. And it got to last year after 2.5 years. I just looked at it and said that I've got to focus on somewhere. I was so distracting, and at the expense of sort of the core business, that I just had to say, listen, we're gonna have to get rid of it. It's not going to make us any money anymore, which was a really gut-wrenching decision to make, because it's one of those decisions when you've built something, you're proud of something, it's doing well, and then you watch it ebb away. And that's probably one of the most painful experiences in my career, making that decision, just watching something that we'd done so well. But that's the learning curve you do. But I suppose the relation to what we're talking about in that is, if the market was in a better place, you take that and you transpose it to Benelux, you look at Spain, you look at Italy, and there's plenty of really good businesses out there who have done phenomenal examples of how you do it. You look at Oliver James and people like that, any of the S3 brands, and there's numerous other sort of businesses out there who have done a phenomenal job of starting narrow, like OJ with actuarials. I know the guys pretty well, but they then expanded Far East and the US, but they've expanded sort of from sort of functionally outside of that from there, but they've started somewhere narrow and just gone global with it. So it's interesting. Again, the decision we've made is we're doubling down in the UK. Well, I truly believe that over the next sort of 4 or 5 years, we'll see a good growth spurt within the UK economy, which with the sort of the exodus of recruiters and the exodus of businesses out there, I'm hoping is going to leave a massive vacuum that I'm going to jump in with both feet and hopefully make a ton of money out of. But we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, it's an interest. The whole landscape is interesting at the moment. I know we're going to come on to AI in a second, but the landscape from a recruitment perspective is interesting. You look at some of the stats on some of the big businesses, like Elite Leaders is a group I'm a member of, and I get a lot of stuff from Sid Barnes. And some of the stats that come out in terms of that you get compressed, and you look at it, like shit.
Yeah. I was at that event.
It's not great news, but every bit of bad news is an opportunity for somebody else, and it is those smaller, agile, more niche, quicker to respond, service driven, where they've got a proper face to the business, that I think will succeed over the next few years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was at that event on Thursday last week, actually. Met Sid.
Of course you saw them all, didn't you?
Yeah, Tara's coming on the podcast soon as well. She's coming around my house, and she's referred me a few people to come on the show as well. But yeah, some of those stats were like, wow. Like there were some positives, like in terms of like, that there is business out there. Like we're not completely doom and gloom, but like a lot of the bigger businesses are kind of doing a downward spiral right now. And they showed, I think, the stats from 24 to today, and they were like, if you look at 2020 or 2019 pre-COVID, like since COVID, like they've been constantly going down. But something before we go on to talking about AI and tech and things like that, you mentioned a couple of things. You said about how you guys do those regular call sprints, that the kind of spec outs aren't hitting as much these days. Whenever I speak to founders and they ask me the same sort of question, like if you were to come in and help us with our BD, like what's your process, what's your strategy? And I always say to people, like, I always used to get really over confused when people ask me about strategy, and I've just really like simplified it, because recruitment's not rocket science. We're not operating on people's brains, right? You just break it down into short term and long term. Like what businesses in your ICP, like we've kind of tackled that, right? Once you understand your ICP, who's actually hiring right now, what's your process to attack the companies aggressively, because you know there's a hot lead there, and who you target companies, how you nurturing them, like how are you actually adding value, how often are you keeping in touch with those guys, because that's, for me, that's where the money is.
Yeah,
Because if you can build those relationships, constantly add value, you get to that job before it goes live. And the amount of
yeah,
jobs that I pulled pre-COVID, post-COVID, where a client would say, Charles, we're not hiring, mate. It's like, that's fine. I've just seen this article. I wanted to tell you about it. Or I'm doing this podcast. I wanted to see if you want to come on. And then because you're constantly in touch with that person, by the time the role does come live, they go, really good timing, mate. I mean, I called them every single month, so I'm going to
yeah.
be there before anyone. And I can start working that job before it's actually gone live. And that was amazing. So I guess my question for you is, especially specifically speaking about the UK market, how do you tackle the business development angle? Like, what's the kind of processes that you guys have?
Yeah,
Like, how does that work?
I think historically we have been more of a service than a sales business. Like I
Yeah.
remember being when I joined, we had a sort of a pyramid structure where we had business. I joined as business development director. My job was to go out and win the clients, win larger clients, and then cascade it down with an account management structure and their delivery function beneath it. And if you look at the profiles of the people we sort of had in the business, that probably worked. You need two or three people to go out and then rainmake ultimately, and they would work around a sort of list of target clients, ICPs that you want to work with. I suppose post 22, then we've had to sort of mix things up a bit because the market has contracted. The amount of vacancies out there has shrunk significantly, as we know. The good thing I've got is, albeit a lot of the guys I've got in the business historically been service led, over the last couple of years, and great account managers, great delivery consultants, but over the last couple of years, they're going to have to learn to eat what they kill. And that's been very much the sort of the mantra over the last few years. From our perspective, I still, and again, you've got to balance short term and long term, as you say, but from my perspective, relationships is still the best way of winning business. And that starts, whether it starts with a candidate perspective, and what
Hmm.
we're really good at and done for donkey's years and done very well is give a good experience to our candidates, whether we place them or we don't, keep in contact with them, build relationships, consistent touch points, and obviously being really transparent about it. Ultimately, when you come to a position where you're hiring, we want you to consider using us. And hopefully over the last X amount of months, years, or the duration of our sort of relationship, you've got a good feeling for how we work. Like, we're not in your face. I'm not going to call you 50 times a day. I'm not going to give you the hard sell. I'm going to make you feel that we're trustable, that we do a good job, and then ultimately you want to give us the business, and it's not a question of us asking for it. So that's the utopia, isn't it? And that's your sort of your longer sales cycle. You've then got to mix it up a bit as well. You've got to have some ambulance chasing. You've got to have some lead covering. You've got to have some target client markets. Like, I did a process at the back end of last year where I got everybody to look at whatever. What are you trying to achieve this year from a billings perspective, right?
Hmm.
If it's 250, 300 grand, whatever it may be. Base it on last year and your current client profile, yeah? How much of that can you see coming out of your existing clients? So basic model, and then whatever the gap was, as opposed to saying, well, you're going to have to find X amount of vacancies to fill that 100 grand, or whatever the numbers were. It's putting a bit more logic around it. Like, right, come on, how are you going to get those? You're going to have A, B, and C's. Give me a list of target clients. And we sat down and went through the target clients and the why were they there? Because it's dead
Mm.
easy to go on ChatGPT and go, give me a list of 100 clients. But I actually did one-to-ones with everybody and sat down with them and go, right, don't just give me a list you've just pulled off bloody AI and tell me these are my target clients because you've remembered it was the 6th of Jan and you've forgotten what recruitment's about in the last 2 weeks of Christmas. I want to know the thought process behind it. And there were, to be fair, everybody had a good. There were some obviously target ones because they were aligned closely to our existing market, their existing clients. There was a tranche where they obviously had people of candidates that had gone in there and they're trying to flip, and the black book type mentality. And there was a tranche of people that have been warming up over the last 1, 2, 5, 10 years, where we're expecting business to come. So I think you've got to have a bit of planning behind it. Obviously, the age old adage that if you've got a good plan behind what you're trying to achieve, but a plan that's built on sort of solid foundations, built on tangibles, not just, yeah, I reckon I
Yeah.
can get 20 grand out of them because I know Bob from 2 years ago, whatever it may be.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think that's important. But the actual building blocks behind that are pretty basic, aren't they? People you know, relationships you've developed over the years, target clients that are within your ecosystem, and then obviously on the back of that, a bit of, I suppose, reactive lead chasing, ambulance chasing stuff that you will go after as and when it comes in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you guys do much like because there's a few businesses I work with do like proper lead generation sprints where they'll speak to candidates that they've worked with, either they've had them out to interviews, offer stage, CV submissions, etc. And they'll just do like a candidate regen sprint and they get a lot of market insights, they get a lot of leads. They'll do some sprints around just pure CV stripping. So going through the database, like who have we spoken to that we've got somewhat good relationships with, and there'll be things they've missed. So look at their CV and go, "Oh, that's an interesting company. Oh my God, they're banging my ICP. Like that's a new business for me
Yeah.
to target, etc." Do you guys do much around like proper lead gen sprints and stuff, or?
We don't hear like I've got a guy at the moment on my contract team who we've had 2 or 3 jobs coming recently for delivery managers, which we've not seen for a couple of years. So we've all
Hmm.
gone a bit rusty. And I was talking to the contract team yesterday. Our conversion on them from a time frame perspective has not been great because it's a bit oh, like Brave New World stuff. Shit, what's one of them? Whereas you go back 2 or 3 years, and then we could shell peas. We could come up with 5 or 6 names straight away. So I've tasked one of the guys in the team as of yesterday to go through the database from Cherry we're on, go through the CRM, and I want you to build some talent pools of delivery managers that we know. We know they're there.
Yeah.
We've got X amount of thousand in there. Lead gen off the back of them, find out the projects they're working on, find out where they're working, what's going on in their world. But more importantly, your sort of route to market with that, your conversation opener with that is, listen, we've seen a big uptick in delivery managers. I'm just trying to work out what your rate is, are you available, blah, 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 all that sort of
Hmm.
good stuff. So we do that on an ad hoc basis. The guys that do that really well in sort of my world are the guys over in Miami at Goliath Partners. Like they have weekly sprints, which is solely lead gen and then lead covering, and then the targets on how many leads they generate. Can they then cover them? I spec CVs, etc., etc. So it's very, very sort of inbuilt into their sales, business development, operating strategy. Not so much here because we've got so much data and we know so many
Sure.
people.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to launch a bit of a statement of works, or we're trying to push our statement of work sort of solution at the moment a bit more, just because we see more and more clients wanting to go down that route than T&M contractors. So we're using it as an excuse to go back to a lot of people we've known that we've not necessarily talked to in great depth over the last couple of years, and it's just a different reason to have a conversation because the have you got any jobs, what are you doing, how are you getting up to is boring as shit. Whereas you've got something a bit more interesting to talk to people about, people tend to be a lot more responsive.
Yeah.
So no, it's a good point, and we'll do that ad hoc primarily depending on if I've got a gap. I've seen a gap in our sort of delivery capability.
Yeah, yeah, because it's embarrassing to say out loud, but after the pandemic, most of us got furloughed for a period of time. Our
Yeah,
market was just completely stagnant, mate. Like, I had like 20 plus retained roles in my team of three. One of them stuck, and I did that deal. It was a big one. It was a Eastern European sales director. I think the fee was like 40K. It was like, wow,
yeah,
it was amazing. That was the only deal I did that year because everything
yeah.
else was just stagnant. And then after, when we come back, obviously you re-engage those clients, still on hold. We can't go into hospitals, da 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 da. And I sat down with my boss and I was like, wow, what are we going to do? And he was like, well, critical care is booming right now. Like no one's really dominating that. You've dominated other markets, so forget managing those guys. I'll manage them. You just do that
Yeah,
market.
go crack into that market. Yeah,
Yeah, and because he trusted me, I was a team leader. Like he thought you've done business development, you're fine. And then like after a couple of weeks, it's like, so like where are we at? And I was like, oh, I'm building some good relationships. He's like, okay, mate, that's great, but we
where's the
need work.
jobs?
Yeah, where's the jobs? Like, like it's we're going into like February now, and like we've got nothing. Like, what's going on? And he was like, put up your leads list for me. And I was like, Right. I showed him my leads list. It was nothing. And he was like, you got no leads? And I was like, no. And he was like, mate, how have you built multiple desks in recruitment? I was like, well, I used to meet as many people as possible, build relationships, and then I would get to the role before anyone else did. And da da da. And he was like, well, we need to get you doing the short term stuff. Like,
Yeah,
do the long term stuff as well, but you
yeah,
need jobs now.
yeah.
And
Where
I
are
was
the
like,
jobs that we can go after and then go and get them for we,
exactly,
mate?
yeah. And like you were saying earlier around like when you come back from Christmas and you almost forget how to do your job. It'd been like 9 months being on furlough, like, and we didn't have
Yeah,
anyone
yeah.
in L&D, like, and the managers were burnt out and everything. So I was like, how the hell do I do this? And it was like,
Mm.
look, here's a list of candidates in that space that we've worked with, etc. Just call them all and just figure out what's happening in the
Where are they
market.
working? What's going on? And you've
Exactly,
got to do a bit of that as well. You've
100%.
got to do that. And it's been, I suppose it's been tough when, like, we've been spoiled over the years, where we've got some big cornerstone clients who we've worked with consistently over periods, even through COVID. We had a couple of clients who did really well during COVID because of the nature of the industry they're in. But when it does all dry out, like it did sort of 24, last year got a bit better, but 23, 24, and you're a bit like, right, we're down to bare bones of jobs. What are we doing?
Yeah.
And it is soul destroying. I feel bad for the industry as a whole, I suppose, when you're banging your head against a brick wall for day in, day out, and you're not getting any joy out of it. But you've got to go through those bits. It prepares
Yeah.
you well. It makes you better for what happens at the end of the day. And ultimately, it'll make you better recruiters. I know it's a cliche, but it does. And as I say, the guys I've got out there, the team I've got out there, have been through COVID, have been through the last couple of years. A lot of them have been through
Yeah.
downturns before. So it is one of those things you just got to take it on the chin. Like,
Yeah.
ultimately, what else are we going to do? We've been
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
this for too long
Yeah.
now. I don't know how to do anything else.
100%. And look,
Um,
like those times, like they do make you a better recruiter when you have to go through those times. And it does change your way of thinking. Like, if what I'm doing isn't working, like a lot of people just do this, it's the definition of
yeah,
insanity, right? They'll just do the
yeah,
same
yeah,
thing over and over. And like what I had to do, and it's a big part of what I do with consultants now. And I'm very grateful that my sales director was very empathetic and supportive and also bloody good at what he does. And he would sit down and look at the leads list and like we did like a traffic light system of like which one
yeah,
we
yeah,
actually think is going to convert, etc. And he could accurately predict what my revenue is going to be based on the
yeah,
list of leads that I had. Because the long term BD that I was doing, that what you said about banging your head up against the wall, like every conversation, like having really good conversations, understanding the business objectives, their pain points, but there's a hiring freeze, and
yeah.
it's like that you can't
That's
like there's
outside
not
our control. You can
there's
only control the controllables, can't you?
precisely. And then as a
Yeah,
young recruiter, especially if you don't necessarily have that or fine tune that mindset of like, okay, out of my control, you are just sat there looking at your boss going, what am I doing
what do we
wrong
do
here?
now?
And they're like, you're asking the right questions, you're doing all this, that, the other, but we need to find out who is hiring. And then
Yeah,
that's not going to be the objection you have to worry about. And then, I think it cost about 4 weeks of just aggressive lead generation, candidate regens, building lists of candidates that were active or even candidates that were passive but open
yeah,
to be specced out. And then we built that market out. And then lo and behold, like that year was one of my best years in recruitment. And it was the first month of that year was absolutely just
wow.
horrendous. A head banging up against the wall. And also, as well, start of 2021 when we were starting to come, it was kind of that hokey pokey lockdown stuff. Like you come out of lockdown and it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
it's a
back in
2 week.
again.
It was just, yeah, it was a horrible time. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's something that I
Well, I
always
say,
say.
but I think the good thing is we're through that now. I'm pretty bullish about the next couple of years. I'm pretty bullish about the rest of this year. Jan was pretty slow. Feb was good. You have to look at. I'm doing a lot. I always look at a lot. The vacancy flow tells a lot.
Mm,
Conversion comes after that, but you've got to get the jobs on first. So I spend a lot of time looking at our vacancy flow. And Jan was low. Feb spiked, and then we had our friend going to playing war games over in Iran, which had a bit of a knock-on effect in March.
yeah,
I think everybody's now decided that we're not going to control the uncontrollable, so we may as well just crack on. Otherwise,
yeah,
this year will be gone before we know it. So April's biggest vacancy flow for this year so far, and probably from I don't know, maybe back end of Q3 last year, which is good news. And April can historically be with Easter, and it can be a slow month. So now it all comes back ball in our court. We've got the work, the appetite's there, clients are buying. We've got to then convert, and that's the conversation I had with the guys later because you look at the conversion stats, and there's a bit of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Weariness or war weariness, or not? It's not apathy because nobody's apathetic and nobody's sort of not wanting to. It's just a bit of being a bit beaten down. And again, any job of a recruitment leader is to keep the troops going.
yeah,
Like, yes, we've had a bit of a slog. We're through it. We've now got good work. We now need to really get uber detailed into our processes, into our candidate management, into our ability to influence clients, sorry. Because clients are still like, somebody told me an analogy the other day, and I'll probably get it wrong, but ultimately there's a dog sat there with a thorn in its paw,
mm,
but it won't take it out. And the reason it won't take it out is it doesn't know if taking it out is going to be more painful than leaving it in. And that's sort of an interesting analogy, but ultimately what the world is in a similar boat. A lot of people are still scared to make decisions. A lot of from a client perspective are like, well, this is causing me a headache, but I know I'm going to get a load of grief for bringing somebody in. It might cause me more of a headache. There's cost involved, accountability on me, blah, blah, blah. So there is still a bit of fear, I think, from the hiring world. That'll dissipate, as it always does,
yeah,
over the next couple of months, and it's a snowball effect. You've just got to get a bit of momentum. And we started getting it this year. There's 2 or 3 times we've started getting it over the last couple of years, and then suddenly some macros kicked it in the nuts basically, and it's suddenly gone a bit flat again. But I do think I think, especially UK, and my general feeling I'm getting, and again, I'm eternally the optimist because you've got to be in the game we're in, is that I think people are bored of the uncertainty. People want a bit more certainty.
Yeah.
People are going to, and the only way we're going to get that is making decisions,
Yeah.
is by going, right, sod this for game soldiers. We're now going to execute this project. We're going to invest in this, whatever it's going to be. We're going to actually say yes to what we've been planning for the last 2 years, and we're actually going to do it. And once that starts happening and confidence comes back in the market, like I was talking to, again, one of the contract guys of the day, contractors, because they've not had that many interviews, or a way of seeing over the years, their actual performance in interviews is appalling because they've not done it. Their confidence have gone, especially in that program space, their confidence have gone because they're not being interviewed for jobs. Whereas you go back 4 or 5 years, they were constantly getting interviews, they were always looking at new opportunities, and
Yeah.
they were on their A game. So one of the sort of I suppose the initiatives we've got in is like, right, asking, if you're getting contracts to interview, ask them when was the last time they had an interview. If it's been a while or there's any doubt whatsoever, get them on a Teams and go through an interview coaching session with them. Because why wouldn't you? You've got
I,
to, and you're helping them, you're helping the clients, because the client may get a great person, but you know how often it's been that there's not the chemistry doesn't click, or the person doesn't sort of give a good account of themselves, and suddenly that deal falls over when it's a perfect match made in heaven, and the candidate, whether it's contract or perm, can do a great job, but for whatever reason it falls over. That's down to us to manage. And I think one of your questions about how to 1%, how do we get better? We can answer that in sort of later on, but I think from my perspective, process management, being a little bit more like us taking accountability for managing the client, managing the candidate, managing the process, making sure we're doing everything we possibly can to make that happen. That's critical at the moment.
yeah,
And we've got to do
100%.
that. And we've got to own that ourselves. And we've got to make sure that we're delivering on that. Otherwise, it's criminal. We're just wasting our time.
Yeah. Well, when we were talking about differentiating ourselves and how to be a consistent brand and stuff, I think back to like when you were saying about the process management, right? I think back to some of the best times I had as a recruiter myself, and some of the best success I've had coaching recruiters. Largely, it's come from that obviously the initial call you have with that candidate and client, but that interview process.
Yeah.
I see such a gap in that interview process management with recruiters and recruitment businesses, because you know what I said earlier around the deal chasing kind of recruitment agencies.
Yeah.
That's like, you've got a CV through the door, brilliant, get five more. But surely it makes more sense to have less candidates, but make sure that they are super prepped, not overly prepped, but super prepped.
Yeah.
You know the ins and outs of the most important things, their reasons for leaving, the need and the pain of the client, etc. That you're gonna, that if you've got three candidates to an interview, you know that one of them is going to get a job unless, God forbid, something out of our control happens, right? And something that I go through a lot with people is mapping out what the company's USPs are, but what are the recruiters' USPs?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, yes, they might buy from your brand, but realistically, they're calling that recruiter, they're calling
Yeah.
you, they're calling me, etc. And something that I did when I started learning NLP in 2017, got my master prac in 2021, and you learn about coaching frameworks and stuff. And I was thinking about our USPs, like we're specialists, we're geographic central, da 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 da. And I started thinking, right, well, I'm doing this NLP qualification, I'm learning how to coach. I'm going to say to recruiters that I'm not just recruiters to candidates. I'm not just a recruiter, but I'm a career
Yeah.
coach, because I'm coaching people outside of work as well. So when I'm speaking to candidates, even if they said, Charles, I've got a final interview with this business, it's big blue chip, I'm not looking, da, 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 and they don't fit anything. I'll be like, is
Can
there
I
anything
help
I can
you?
do to
Yeah.
help you with your interview process? Where
Why
have you
wouldn't you do
fallen
that then?
short?
Why wouldn't you?
But some recruiters don't. And this is the
I know.
thing. Like, they think very narrow-mindedly with the blinkers on and don't
And
think
and
long
it's also
term.
short-termism as well. As we
Very
go back
short
to
term.
everything, it's long. Like
100%.
during the last couple of years, when the market's been tough, a lot of my guys have been going out doing CV coaching, exactly that. CV reviews, anything we can do to support you. That, yeah, there's obviously a gain in it from us. I'm not a charity. We know that there's you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type scenario.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'd expect that to come to fruition at some point in the future. But ultimately, why wouldn't you do that? We're not just here, well, primarily we're here to make money, but we're not just here to make money. We're part of the ecosystem.
Yes.
And anything that smooths or greases the wheels that makes the world turn better and more efficiently is going to benefit us. And I think
100%.
that you'd be stupid not to do that. You'd be very short-sighted not to do that. And you're never going
100%.
to go to what we said at the start. which is build long-term relationships.
100%. I learned this thankfully when I moved from perm from healthcare contract interview. They weren't really doing interviews, and the interviews they
No,
did were,
that's just
are you?
transactions they come into.
Yeah,
You get them to
100%.
turn up.
100%. And if it was like a long term, like we did some contracts in like in the Guernsey hospitals, like the Channel Islands, and
Yeah,
they basically would do like a half an hour interview to make sure that you're compatible to work with those people there and stuff. But largely it was very transactional. When I moved from that to perm, I didn't know how to prep a candidate for interview, and it was
yeah,
sales. I didn't realize that salespeople had to close an interview. My first ever interview I had, one of the senior consultants was like, "Did you prep the candidate for interview?" I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "What do you do to prep him?" So I told him about the company, sent him the job spec, and he went, right. Did you ask them what questions he was going to ask, how he'd respond to these
yeah,
questions, how he's
yeah.
going to close? And I looked at the senior con and was like,
What he's wearing when he turns up,
yeah.
anything
And I
like
was like,
how he's getting there.
we didn't have training. I was like, well, I didn't know. Like, I don't know what to do. And then he told me that unfortunately, candidate hasn't got the job. When they said to him, "Is there any other questions from you?" He went, "No, thank you for your time," and didn't close the interview. He's this bloody
Yeah,
sales rep. He should be closing. So I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I learned that like in my second week of permanent recruitment. So
Yeah.
after that, it's like sometimes you need to go through the pain to really, really learn. And I worked with a recruiter about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. And the ratio of offer to placement was so low. And one of the
Yeah.
sessions was a specific like cold calling session with each other. And he went, "Oh, sorry, mate, can I make this quick call? Got a candidate doing an interview this afternoon." I was like, "Do it with me. Let's just see how you prep him.
Yeah,
I'm going
yeah,
to observe it and I'll make some notes." Mate, honestly, it was one of them ones where it's just like, "Hey, Adam, so you got your interview tomorrow. Just wanted to wish you good luck. Yeah, how you
yeah.
feeling? All good?
You okay? You
Wicked,
know where you're
man.
going? Yeah, brilliant.
Nice
Thanks,
one.
bye.
Cool. All right, mate. Nice one. Speak to you soon." Didn't close for a time to speak up. Nothing. No
No.
preparation. I was like, right, we're going to call this candidate back. Here are some questions you're going to ask. Da, 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 da. As soon as he called that candidate, sorry, mate, I've completely forgot. I was,
Yeah,
a bit of a rush. I've got some questions for you. So, what are you going to ask the client? Da, da, da. Ask all these questions. By the end of the call, Adam, the candidate was like, "I really appreciate you taking the time to
yeah.
go through. I feel
You're
so much more
helping me get. You're
confident."
helping me to succeed.
A
It's
hundred
why wouldn't
percent.
you do it?
And they booked a time to speak. Like you're like, as
Yeah.
soon as that interview
Feedback.
finishes, I'm the first person you speak to.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, the candidate called him straight after, absolutely buzzing. And it's simple things like that that people forget. But anyway, I could go on
And
tangents
that's it.
forever.
And again, and more important in the current climate is if the world starts turning, we've got to pull ourselves out of our slumber, out of our hibernation, and realize that the world's back on, and we've got to get back onto our A game like really quickly. Otherwise, and again, it comes down to conversion. That's what I'm tracking at the moment. It's like vacancy to conversion on a monthly basis. And our contract business used to run at, I don't know, 75, 80%, and the perm business was probably 65% conversion, vacancy to deal, which is great. But we're not being in that world, and that's with some historic clients we did well. I know where we are today, and it's not where I want to be. So there's been a bit of rockets going off around here over the last few days. That right, what are we going to do to move the needle on that conversion now with the vacancy flow suddenly coming back? Otherwise, it's criminal.
Yeah,
But yeah,
100%. 100%. Well, look, before we get to the final question, I know that we wanted to just touch a little bit on the impact of AI because
yeah,
there's a lot of people out there, Adam, and I don't know if you share this sentiment, but there are the doom and gloom AI people that like it's going to
yeah,
steal everyone's jobs. Then you've got like the naive people that are like AI will never replace anything we do. Da, 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 da. To throw it out there, I personally believe that back in the day when you would have like your research associates that would scrape info on Zoom info and things like that, AI can do those types of things, right? SDRs in sales companies that are just qualifying leads and stuff,
yeah,
essentially AI can kind of do that. My belief, for now at least, is what AI can't do is jump on a video call like this or go in person or have a conversation with someone and genuinely build that relationship and become that
yeah,
partner with someone and truly understand and empathize with what's going on in and out of work. So I think for recruiters that are kind of worried about AI in the industry, I think if you can actually genuinely differentiate yourself and be human, I think you'll succeed as long as you're following a good process and stuff. But I'm curious before we wrap up to get your opinions on it.
yeah. I think I'll give that analogy again that I gave you on the phone the other day, which feel free to steal, everybody. I stole it from somebody a few years ago. AI is not going anywhere; it's here to stay. But ultimately, what AI is not going to do is replace the human element of what we do for a living. And the best analogy I can give you is an airline pilot. Okay, the takeoff and the landing is done manual still, right? Autopilot's been in for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. The actual flight is automated. So to bring it back to recruitment, the engagement with candidates, the engagement with clients, the initial relationship building, the takeoff, you've got to do yourself. You've got to be human element. And the close of the client, the close of the candidate, the getting the deal done at the end, the landing, has also got to be done by a human. And that can't really change. Like you might be able to automate some of that if you're in high volume
Sure.
warehouse jobs or
Yeah.
somewhere else where the close and the close is not necessarily, it's just a sent unautomated, there's your contract turn up Monday. But in anything professional services, anything where you're looking at a certain level of seniority, you're going to need a human element. You're going to have to understand the drives of the individual, the drivers of the client, the needs, the doors to close to be able to get that deal closed. And that's never going to go away. I think I see the future very much. Listen, I've trialed God knows how many AI tools over the last few years, and some are great, some are awful, but they'll only get better with time, I'm sure. But I think the future seems to me to be for me is a lot more people spending a lot more, or recruiters spending a lot more time talking to candidates and clients, and the removal of the administrative, the removal of the sort of the legwork, the automation of the legwork, whether that's candidate attraction, whether that's client lead generation, whatever it may be. You plug in those two sides of the equation, and the human element is then the execution of that. It's then the talking to the candidates, it's the chasing down of the leads, it's the engagement with the clients, and that's the bit that should always be done by humans, I think. So, yeah, listen, it's going to have a huge impact on what we do as an industry, dependent on the sector you're in more so than others. But I think the world that I'm living in, the technology recruitment, the professional services type recruitment, it should make, as a business owner, my OpEx more efficient because probably got less people hopefully doing more. PPH should go up,
Hmm.
profitability billings per head, and ultimately the people in the recruitment world should earn more.
Yeah.
So there should be a big win. There'll be less people in the industry, but the people in the industry are better, more efficient, more experienced, and earning more. And from
Yeah.
a business owner perspective, as long as you get that slice right, you should make more money out of it. So
Mm.
I think you've got to embrace it. You've got to look at how parts of whichever parts of your organization you can automate, where's best to plug AI in and how to use it best. And then I think the other thing I'm looking, there's a couple of other points to that, is one, get consistent operating process across the business. If you're going to plug it in, make sure that everybody uses it in the same way and make sure that everybody's using it as best as you possibly can. And the second piece, which I think is really important, is the governance piece. Like the amount of data that is leaving, whether it's GDPR or business risk or just general being sensible about how you sort of own the data in your business, you've got to have a process and a policy around that. Because the
Yeah.
amount of stuff that people are flinging into chat or Claude or whatever it may be, business critical documents, most of it's in breach of GDPR, I would imagine. Like get corporate accounts on these tools, get a policy on these tools, get people to sign a policy on these tools, and make sure that everybody operates it in the right way. And if you do that, then it should make us more money.
Yeah, mate, that's a class answer, by the way. That's a and I love the quote, and I remember you saying that when we spoke a few weeks ago, and it's so true, right? Like I had Kalpesh Baxi on the podcast, and he was talking about the research he's done in terms of how many steps there are and stages there are in the recruitment process, how many of which you can automate. And he was saying
Yeah,
there was something like 90 plus steps that you can automate, but realistically, you should only do about a third of that.
yeah,
And I see some businesses that go too far with the automation and that personal touch has disappeared. And then you get some businesses, and myself included, like I use SourceWhale for the first 6 months when I set my coaching business up, just automated all my email outreach and it was just shit, right?
yeah,
And then I went too personal and I was just sending a fraction, like 10% of my email outreach and stuff and barely getting any results because I was being too personalized, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah,
But this is a little bit of a plug because obviously SourceWhale sponsors the podcast and I've been using their platform, the whole shebang for nearly 6 months, but five months now. And I've only recently just started to use their dialer, and I had no idea because I tried to use it for my laptop and the connection was horrible. So I just thought I'm not going to bother using this. Realized they've got a mobile app. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because most recruiters hate admin, right?
yeah,
Me as a recruiter, I used to spend an hour a day typing up my notes on the system and stuff like that. Now you've got, and by the way, SourceWhite aren't the only company that do this. There are other tech, but obviously I use their dialer and it has all the summary for every single call. It
yeah,
has all the notes on there, so I don't have to like. I don't remember. I still type the main bullet points of the conversation because I want to keep my brain sharp and stuff. But you've got that there. I can set up an automated campaign that runs in the background. You can use things like Cando and Cambox that
yeah,
automate connecting with people. There are so many things now that if I was 20 years old again, coming into the recruitment industry now with the mindset and attitude I had around building relationships, meeting
Yeah.
people, being personable, being human,
And get
and
everything
also,
else automated.
mate, like,
Like I've seen quite a few lead gen tools. Some of them are amazing. They just drop them straight into your ATS. So
yeah,
anybody can plug on in the morning. There's your leads to chase down. Yeah,
mental.
everything else is your callbacks can be automated. The CVs can be CV sort of writing be automated. I did an entire RFI through Copilot the other day. Like normally we'd spend hours and cut and paste an old one. I dropped the RFI document in terms of the request, what they'd sent me, and I said, make that, just sort that out,
Yeah,
drop some information that we've used before. Obviously, we tweaked it as well, but I didn't think we were going to win it because it was a bit outside our wheelhouse. But I thought, sod it, we'll have a go at it, and we didn't win it. But the document, the proposal that we put in place was great. It was phenomenal. It was better than anything we'd have done if we'd have done the traditional bid writing, blah blah, all this sort of stuff. So yeah, just use it where you can use it to make it efficient. And why wouldn't you? I think you've got to do that, otherwise you're gonna get left behind a bit, I think.
yeah, 100%. Awesome, Adam. Well, I really appreciate your time today. I think it's been an awesome episode. As you know, final question, following this
Yeah.
particular episode, how can people get 1% better in recruitment?
I think there's a number of bits you can do. I think in modern day and age, I think L&D still plays a huge part. Yeah, you've got to identify, especially if some of your consultants have been in hibernation. Look at your L&D. Look at the programs you're running through your people. Look at the weaknesses or the areas of weakness you've got across your team, and do something about it. Bit of going back, even if it's going back to basics, like we talked about process management before, interviewing candidates. Candidates are in the same situation because it's been a bit of a bit quiet over the last few years. But look at your business, look at your team at the moment, identify where the weaknesses are and do something about it, and get people match fit and get people back on their A game sooner rather than later. Because I do hope and I do believe that the market's going to boom over the next few years.
100%. Great answer. Solid little plug there as well. Love it. I saw a post the other day, and a guy called Josh Braun commented on it, and someone was saying about like professional athletes, this how much training and coaching they get versus
Yeah.
sales reps and stuff. I think the difference is, and look, this is me saying this as a trainer, like I never really had a lot of L&D, didn't really have a lot of training. I had like the coaching and stuff and mentoring from my managers and stuff, but you do learn a lot on the job. But it is fascinating. And this is actually, Sid said this at the event, right? He said it's so fascinating that the recruitment industry invests such little amount into training their staff and upskilling their staff. And I see a lot with businesses, and like the common objection I get is, oh, my guys are really experienced, they don't need support. And I'm like, really? And I was like, well, actually, to be honest, when I was really senior, that's when I kind of needed probably more support, because I started to fall into bad habits. And,
Yeah.
you're still quite consistent with your numbers. But I look back and I'm thinking I could have probably done a lot more if I just had that little bit of mentorship once a week or something like that to just fine tune some things.
The athlete's the best analogy again, isn't it? Because it is like the Dave Brailsford, the British cycling thing, one of the 1% gains we can make. And if you actually extract that over the course of a year, in incremental gains, it's probably worth an extra 40 or 50 grand to your
Yeah.
billings at the end of the year. So if you can just identify where the bits weakness are, you've got to, I think everybody should do that to themselves. I think anybody who's running and managing a team should look at individual stats. Like we do MBRs every month, and we're very stat driven. We pull all the stats
Hmm.
off, we compare it against, and we've got an overarching percentage versus what we expect people to do. And that's great, but it's great talking about it. But then it's like, what is the plan to
Yeah.
make them better after that? And that's the bit that a lot of people don't do, because it's easy to walk out of a review going, right, we see these subs were 80% last month, you need to be 85% this month. It's not like that's the what, right? The how bit comes with the L&D piece, the identification of what the weaknesses are, and then, right, this is how I think, or this is how we're going to help you change it. And that's the bit. That's the bit when I talk about L&D. It's L&D could be from a rookie or to somebody who's been doing it 25 years. It's what are you doing well? What aren't you doing so well? And how are we going
Yeah.
to change, move the dial on what you're not doing well? And that's what it is. That's the
Yeah.
L&D piece. And it's individual or it's specific to one task activity or whatever it may be.
Absolutely, mate. Spot on. Well, look, I'll put your details in the description of the video. So for people that made it this far, if they want to reach out to Adam, his details are there. Obviously, my details are there as well. But yeah, finally, everyone that has tuned in, if you've made it this far, thank you so much. Love doing this, and yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast. If you got value from this episode, make sure that you're following the show so that you never miss an episode. And if you're listening on a platform that allows it, a quick rating or a review really helps people find the podcast. Feel free to share it with someone in your team or your network who you think would benefit. And just remember that small improvements daily lead to big results over time. So, thank you again for tuning into this week's episode, and I'll see you next week.